Will the Minnesota Vikings succumb to Dagger against the Los Angeles Rams? Yes, you've heard the word. Dagger is all the rage when talking about the Minnesota Vikings defense. We're going to explain even more tonight why it could be a problem against the Los Angeles Rams as I bring in my colleague from A to Z Sports, AJ Schulte, foremost Rams expert on the internet, to talk everything Los Angeles Rams, how the Vikings and Rams are very similar yet different, and how the Vikings could end up losing this game because of the Rams offense. Welcome to the Real Forno Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Real Forno Show, hosted by the one and only Tyler Forness. A to Z Sports sought him out to be their Minnesota Vikings reporter and NFL analyst. And he's a proud contributor over at SKOL North's Purple Daily. Tyler is also the captivating host of The Good, The Bad, and The Hungry on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, and a founding member of Vikings First and SKOL.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Real Forno Show. I am your host, Tyler Forness. With me, as always, in the top left corner, he is producer Dave. He is going to migrate here in a second, as for some reason my camera. You know what? The best part is this is Dave's fault because Dave bought the camera. So any production issues, I can blame Dave. He bought all this stuff. And with me, about to appear to my left as Dave switches the screen, he is a foremost Rams expert for A to Z Sports, also covering the Oklahoma Sooners. He is draft guru AJ Schulte. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, man. How are you doing? You excited for? Should be a good game this weekend, right?
You know what? I actually am excited for this game because this is the first time Kevin O'Connell is going against his mentor Sean McVay, and historically, I don't know how McVay does against his mentees. But I know like Nick Saban only lost to one throughout his entire career. And I think he was that Jimbo Fisher loss towards the end of that Texas A&M run. Like he was so good against his mentees. Has McVay developed a track record against guys who have left him to become head coaches?
Well, he did beat Zach Taylor in the Super Bowl.
That is true.
That's part of it. But then also just a couple of weeks ago, he lost to Matt LaFleur in Green Bay. Right, so it's a bit of a mixed bag in terms of the results. Right, there's good and bad, but overall, like it's more just I think they always have such a good time when they play because there's always such a unique familiarity, and McVay is such a well respected coach.
Oh yeah, and now you have Kevin O'Connell on the other side, who let's be real, it kind of feels like he is, for lack of a better term, like McVay Jr. with a lot of the concepts that he runs and a lot of the adjustments that both have made to the running game, where they've gone more towards a gap-centered scheme rather than running almost exclusively zone, where McVay always was like that inside and mid-zone guy, and the Vikings here have been so used to outside zone. Like, how has that transition for the Rams gone to more of a power element? Because here it's been a little bit of a mixed bag.
It's weird because they can both run the ball out of gap. Like gap is their only successful run. Like if you look at their success rate in inside zone, outside zone, stretch, stuff like that, they're horrible. They're like 28th, 29th in EPA per rush out of it. But then you get into gap and the results shift. But then you look at the production, and like last week against the Raiders, Kyren Williams only ran for 76 yards on 21 carries. Right? So they're good at it, but they're not great at it either, right? Which is kind of it's a mixed bag, like kind of like what's going on with the Vikings.
Yeah, and I got to ask about Kyren Williams. It felt to me when they made the selection of Blake Corum in the third round, because we talked about it in real time, it felt like Corum was going to become the guy at some point. And I expected that to happen due to a Kyren Williams injury, because that's what always seems to happen. Why has Corum struggled to get onto the field so far? Obviously, Williams has been relatively healthy, but it felt like they were going to try and get him involved anyways.
I wish I knew, because I mean it's not it's not for a lack of ability, right? Like we know how
Mhm.
good Blake Corum is. We know the caliber of player that he can be, but they're giving more carries to guy like Kyron, and it's just not really working. Like they said, they had a big plan last week against the Raiders, and it never really came into fruition. Where they was like, we want Kyron to play 2 drives and Blake to play the third, but then he gets he doesn't really get this. He only gets 3 carries. I just had to look that up real quick. He only gets 3 carries in the whole game, right? And Kyron Williams gets 21. So it's clear that like the whole balance that they wanted when they drafted Corum and they were like, this is our 2-headed monster. We're going to really build
Mhm.
around this. It's not really coming to fruition. And whether that's a case of Blake Corum just doesn't know the offense particularly well, or he's just not like impressed the coaches in practice because they're very big on on the nitty gritty little details about things. I don't know personally, because I wrote pretty much all offseason. I was like, yeah, at some point this season, Blake Corum's going to be the guy, injury or not to Kyrum, because he's just a simply more talented player. And
Mhm.
now we're sitting here 6 games into the season and going, I don't know when Blake Corum's going to play.
Yeah, that's always an interesting one. Hopefully, he doesn't end up a cast off, kind of like half of Kyle Shanahan's third round running backs, because like
Right. Right.
they
Yeah.
they they've been on the same staffs before, but this Rams team is really interesting because it feels like, from an outside perspective, that Matthew Stafford is just hero balling this team to success. And yeah, they're 2-4, but they lost Puka Nacua early on in the game, week 1 game against the Lions, and they still almost won it. Week 2, they lose Cooper Kupp in that brutal loss to the Cardinals, and they're getting Cooper Kupp back this week. Puka Nacua had his practice window activated. What's made Matt Stafford so special, especially when you're looking at all those offensive line injuries where they were basically starting Kevin at left tackle? And inside joke, I apologize, everybody.
Yeah. No, it's strange because Stafford has really carried the team, but last week
Mhm.
was off of a bye week. You would have expected them to be a little bit better, but Stafford really struggled last week. Like they missed a couple opportunities downfield early, and then the
Yeah.
offense just like turtled. Right. I mean, it was one of the most bizarre Matthew Stafford passing charts I've ever seen because it was all just underneath low, like high completion percentage targets to just keep the offense moving. And it was their worst outing of the season. They were dreadful last week against the Raiders. But Matthew Stafford, on the flip side, has been hit 42 times this season and has been sacked
Ooh.
17 times already. We're 6 games in. That's a horrible ratio, right? They're already on their 4th left guard of the season. If you think the Vikings guard drama is anything, the Rams are on their 4th at 1 guard spot this season. And so it's just this case of Stafford, like Stafford is hero balling this team to just keep them in games, but you have to win games. And the issue is that he's just like, when those misses happen, the offense just falls apart. And with Stafford getting hit as often as he has been, I mean, like this was his first healthy offseason, really, but he's getting so beat up in every single game that the regressions and accuracy are starting to hit. And so now it's a case of they have to hope beyond hope that this offensive line, when everybody starts to come back later this month and into November, that's when things start to click. But that's a long way away from right now.
Yeah, it feels like a long way away. One of the interesting things that we've heard over the past couple of days, and both from a quasi reliable but not reliable source, and then some rando who works for a gambling company, talking about the Vikings trying to acquire Matt Stafford. Um,
Yeah,
it was finally talked about by one of the beat reporters for the Vikings, Ben Gessling. He inquired about it. Zero truth to it whatsoever, which, let's be real, nobody's surprised. But
yeah,
from the Rams perspective, because I think this is an interesting one, they restructured Stafford's contract at the beginning of the year to kind of give him some more money. He spent last week with Fox. Could this be a situation where they actually might want to trade Matt Stafford if they get the right offer, or are they fully pot committed for at least this year with him?
I don't think. I mean, obviously, if you get the right offer, that changes things. But it would take a pretty substantial offer, I think, for anybody to acquire Stafford. I didn't believe the Vikings rumor at all because it didn't make any sense to me. Like it like from in a vacuum sense of, yeah, you want to do everything you can to win a Super Bowl. Obviously, Stafford is great, but it didn't really strike me as the kind of move that a team would make in a rational kind of like win now scenario that the Vikings are in, because you don't want to have that disruption and locker room drama of Darnold is still playing relatively well. You don't want to insert a new guy who hasn't really been playing well the last couple of games. So it's just, if the right team made the offer, maybe, but I feel pretty inclined to say that they're going to stick with Stafford. But I do think this might be his last year with the Rams. I think this might be his sunset ride into retirement this season.
And I think the question is pertinent to ask because one of the things we've seen from the Rams, and I know it's been a real frustrating point for you, AJ, is the fact that they get less capital back for their players than other teams, but they do so because they want to be a very player-friendly organization. And there's positives and negatives for that. And if they beat the Vikings on Thursday, I feel like, okay, you're in contention now in the NFC West. You don't have to feel like, hey, we're playing complete catch up, because the Seahawks are 4-3, the Niners are 3-4, and you're going to be sitting right there at 3-4 within one game of both of those teams. And then it's anybody's ball game, especially with how the Niners have played this year. But it feels like if the right team came along, if somebody rips a knee and they're a Super Bowl contender, Matt Stafford could come in and be the guy. And I think it would be really interesting to see. No, I mean, I'm not going to wish anybody hurt, but an opportunity present itself for the Rams because of how they like to operate their organization. I mean, we just saw Ernest Jones earlier today get traded for more than the Rams got back for him. Not to dig a screwdriver into you or anything, but this organization itself is very interesting in that way. And I like that they're a player-friendly organization. I'm sure the players do too, but talk to me about your kind of viewpoint of it, because I think when how the Vikings kind of handle some of their things, I'm wondering how much translation there might be because of what Kevin O'Connell did end up seeing in Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's like you said, they do try to be player friendly, and they always try to stay ahead of the curve in everything they do. They want to be innovative, for good and worse. They try to have the next big breakthrough, right? In the case of specifically Matthew Stafford, they love the guy. Everybody in the Rams organization loves Stafford. Everybody on the Rams team loves McVay, and people want to play for McVay. But the way that they handled specifically Ernest Jones in this offseason was a weird shift. In a lot of their moves this season were in this offseason. I think I wrote about it when I was still at Sporting News. It was very all in a way of we're writing this thing, but then they come in and they trade Ernest Jones. So it's I have no idea what the whole goal of the Rams organization is right now, because if you want to be winning now with Matthew Stafford, then why didn't you make the move up for Brock Bowers or Roma Dunze, right? You made the move up for Brady Fisk, which is fine in a vacuum, but you didn't make the move up for another player. Now they could have just gotten, they just said flat out, no, we don't want to, because they were in negotiations. Yeah. With several teams. With the Jets were one that they were involved with, a couple of the other teams up there at the top. But it's really just I think this team right now, by and large, lacks an identity. And part of that is on, I think, the front office and the coaching staff, because they just have there's no real clear goal of what this organization wants right now. Because we're balancing this win now because we have Matthew Stafford, but we're also going with this huge youth movement on defense to maybe build for a future without Matt Stafford. But then we're still keeping, and then now we've got Cooper Kupp trade rumors. And so it's just really, it's kind of like a jumbled mess right now in that organization of McVay is in such a problem solving like dark room by himself trying to figure everything out right now. And so with this Rams team, I think you kind of touched on it a little bit. If you win this game, you're back in contention. Like and that's when they start to get aggressive at the trade deadline, right? That's when everything's the Les Snead pushes that button that calls up somebody and is like, "Hey, I got a first round pick now. Let's start talking." But if you lose, that's where you know that they could be inching even closer to the other big huge reset button, right?
Yeah.
That is, you know, they were involved with the Chiefs well into the night over Cooper Kupp before they made the move for DeAndre Hopkins. And I'm sure the fact that they're actively calling teams to trade Cooper Kupp, I think, is a sign of. I think now the push is going to be if we lose this game, that's when we're going to start. I think they're going to be a seller.
Yeah, the Cooper Kupp thing is interesting, and we talked about this last night. I still think that the Buffalo Bills should be all over him, and I kind of understand the counter argument because I think you want to keep him away from teams that could eventually play you in the playoffs and use Cooper Kupp as a weapon to beat you. But it is very interesting. He is returning against the Minnesota Vikings. And one of the big things when it comes to the Vikings defense is Brian Flores' aggressive approach. Almost all of the coverages he likes to play behind it can be beaten by Dagger. And Dagger, for those of you that don't know, is a very simple route concept. You have a clear out route on the inside, either a post or a go, and then you have a deep in or a dig route running right behind it into that void in whatever zone, man coverage. There is a void there, and you can exploit it. And what does Sean McVay like to do? He loves to spam concepts like Dagger.
Yeah.
What when you look at the Brian Flores defense and his idea of, hey, Dagger just cripples him. It crippled him at the end of last year, cost the Vikings a playoff spot. It crippled him against the Lions. It could have against the Texans, 49ers, and Packers, but they were able to get plenty of pressure and really mitigate any of that success. Why do you think Brian Flores has not figured out how to stop this yet? Is it just that he thinks, oh, this is just the cost of doing business, and if I get enough pressure, it doesn't matter?
Yeah, I think that's always been Brian Flores' approach of the dividends of hurrying up the quarterback ultimately pay off for being able to hit a dig route, right? Because unfortunately, in the NFL right now, the amount of quarterbacks that successfully get to the dig route nowadays is or even hit the middle of the field is decreasing year by year, right? And the unfortunate bit is when you play the Lions, who have arguably the best offensive line in the NFL, and Jared Goff, who excels at throwing middle of the field. I would argue that Jared Goff is probably the best passer to the middle of the field in the NFL. When that risk approach, it has its drawbacks, and if you're not able to affect Goff, like we know that pressure can affect players like Jared Goff, right? He has a tendency to pumpkin when he gets sacked or where there's rushers in his face. The accuracy does kind of dip, and so I think if you're Brian Flores, specifically for that Lions game, I think you ultimately you just live with it, right, and just be like, yeah, you know what, he got us on that one, but what if 2 plays it's a third and 5, and they try the same concept, and I'm able to get a free rusher in his face, right? You just kind of live with those results. Fortunately for the Vikings, you get the Rams this week, who you'll be able to get pressure on pretty often, right? Their offensive line, like we said earlier, Stafford's been hit 42 times. He's been sacked 17. It's pretty dreadful up front for the Rams right now. They've not, again, injuries have kind of hurt a lot, especially with Jonah Jackson, Steve Avila, guys like that. Like they've been hurt, but it's the tackle room that has been just awful. And then they've rotated, like we said, 4 guards into the left guard spot. Justin Dedich now is a rookie undrafted free agent, and he's having to play left guard. And so it's just like if you're Brian Flores, you're just spamming that button, right? Like that is your easy button this game of, you know what? They might hit a dig route over us, but I'm going to live with being able to bring Matthew Stafford to the ground and affect him, because the Raiders last week did something very similar. They were a very aggressive defense, and they shut down the Rams game. Like, the only reason the Rams scored was because of short fields.
Okay.
Now, and they don't get the luxury of playing Gardner Minshew this week, right? But like they started 1 of 7 on third downs against the Raiders last week. They haven't scored a touchdown in the first quarter in 6 straight games. And like, that's a problem when you're in your game script and you're not even able to score there. And so for the Vikings now, with this high pressure thing like that, like the weaknesses on Dagger are a very clear thing. And I think you just kind of live with that, with the nature of this defense. But the good news is also that, like, even if Cooper Kupp is healthy, Jordan Whittington is out. So the other 2 receivers are Demarcus Robinson and Tutu Atwell. Are you really scared of Tutu Atwell, Demarcus Robinson, Tyler Johnson, and then a 31-year-old Cooper Kupp coming off of an injury? It's not going to hit quite the same as Amon-Ra St. Brown and Tim Patrick and Jamison Williams, right? This is an interesting game for the Vikings, because I think what they do specifically is very good against what the Rams want to do on offense.
Yeah, and I find it really interesting. DeMarcus Lawrence, by the way, Florida Gator legend. Only reason why they beat Kentucky in 2014. Nobody else needed to know that, but I will always love that guy. I want to talk about how the Vikings can attack Matthew Stafford in this offense, because you mentioned that Stafford's been hit an exorbitant amount of times, already sacked 17 of them. How are teams attacking Stafford? Are they blitzing him a lot? Are they really focusing on getting home with 4 and just using stunts and simulated pressures? What is the best route to go to get in his mind and take him down?
It's a little bit of everything. There are some teams that are able to just, get home with even 3. We've seen that. The Packers just they ran everything. They threw the kitchen sink at the Rams, which they didn't really need to do, but they did it anyways. So teams are just really able to just kind of pick what they want to do against this Rams offensive line, because it seems like every week there's somebody giving up and somebody getting beat, whether it's the left guard spot that they've rotated, whether it's Jackson or Havenstein or Kevin Dotson has been solid on the inside, but it's really just like a lot of the miscommunication errors. Like, I don't know off the top of my head, you might know how much the Vikings stunt up front, but because the Rams have rotated a lot of the guards and the centers, like they've got a 6th round backup rookie center in Bo Limmer. And so a lot of that communication and passing off of stunts is something that could get picked up on, especially by Brian Flores, who wheels up pressure with rocks at this point. Like he could get he could get me and Kevin to get to the quarterback, I swear. But like it's really just like this. It's a seeping hole in of the offensive line, where it's just like there's nobody that is really able to stop anything that teams have thrown at them.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting one. I don't have like the rates in front of me. I actually don't know where to find stunt rates. I'm guessing that might be SIS.
It might be. I know the very expensive PFF has it. And so like but again, it's just teams can pick whatever they want. They can rush 3, they can rush 4, they can send 5 and 6, and the Rams simply, like most of the time, especially if Stafford's playing like last week, he was late to a few other of the reads. They had a deep throw. There was a busted coverage by the Raiders, and Tyler Johnson was open, and Stafford was late to the read and got hit as he threw. And instead of being an explosive play, it turned into an incompletion, right? And so like even if the Vikings do give that up, if they're still able to get home, they could still affect the throw, much like the Raiders were doing it. The Vikings could definitely be able to do it.
Yeah, the Vikings do stunt a lot. One of the things that it has been a contentious point for them is they don't have defensive tackle. Harrison Phillips is a solid player. He is not really a pass rusher. You want to utilize him more in the run game, but he can create penetration in the pass rush. It's just not his forte. And you prefer to save him for what he's great at, which is dominating against the run. Otherwise, it's Jerry Tillery, who I'm going to be honest, Tillery has been way better than we ever thought he would be. He's been a very solid contributor for this team thus far. And let me pull it up. He has 9 pressures. Like, I expected him to be really bad. He's been pretty solid and has not been a deterrent for this team. But they've been running a lot of 4 edge rusher packages, putting Pat Jones, Jihad Ward on the inside, sometimes Jonathan Grenard, which I think they should do a little bit more of, because you can utilize that 35.5-inch arm length and just really take advantage of some of those guards. But like, Grenard is one of the highest pressure getters in the National Football League at 38 so far this year, and he's been a monster. So that's kind of how the Vikings are doing it. They like to use the 4 edge rushers. Ivan Pace Jr. is still one of the better blitzers in the National Football League because of his unique size and quickness element. He can kind of just dip underneath offensive linemen's reach and kind of like squeeze in there like he's Mighty Mouse or something. It's pretty fun to watch. So I'm going to be intrigued to see how Flores wants to attack, and especially because of how Dagger impacted them last week, and they're playing another version of this same offense. If he wants to just try and drop more guys in coverage and utilize those front 4 to stunt, because I think that could be where the game is won or lost for the Vikings if they don't get home against Matt Stafford with some of these blitzes, and he and Cooper Kupp just have that chemistry and he can just find holes in the zone and pick them apart. I think that could be a really big factor. But I wonder if there's going to be any rust with Cooper Kupp, because, I mean, one of the interesting things, he's been injured a lot, AJ. And when he has been injured, you can, it can take a minute to get back into the game flow. Has he ever had that kind of experience where he's coming back and it takes him a little bit to get back into things, or is he just completely fine when he returns?
Yeah, this was the case last season, right? He struggled. He started a little bit slow last season when he came back from injury, but then as he kind of got back into the swing of things, like, he was a big factor in their game against the Ravens and the Browns, and I want to say it was week 14 and 15 of last season. It takes him a while, just again because his game is so focused on the technical side of things, right? He's a very technique-based wide receiver instead of an athleticism-based wide receiver. And so just getting back into the game flow, it's different, but it still like every other player in the National Football League, it takes time to get back from injury. But we'll see just how effective he'll be, because I don't think you're going to see anything quite like the Super Bowl performance from Cooper Kupp this season, right? I think that ship has sailed out of his prime. But can he still get open? Yeah. Is he still going to make tough catches? Yeah, absolutely. It's just, is he physically ready for the contact at the catch point? Is he physically, still able to cut as well as he was? So we'll see. We'll see how that one goes. They wouldn't clear him if they didn't feel like he was 100%. And if they are trying to trade him, he will probably see like 1 billion targets go his way just to try and spark something. And so again, it's a case of we just have to wait and see how good Cooper Kupp is. But last season when he returned, it did take him a couple games to start getting going.
That'll be interesting to know. Is there any chance at all we see Puka Nacua? He was just activated. His practice window was just activated. How do the Rams handle injuries? Because with the Vikings, they maximize that practice window. Justin Jefferson used almost the entire 3 weeks. TJ Hawkinson's 3 weeks is on Friday. Is there any chance we see him tomorrow night?
I would say no. They officially marked him as questionable for this game. Mm-hmm. I don't think you need to rush him back. Right. I would like to see him back because I think Kupp and Puka playing is the only way you're going to spark this offense right now. You just need those 2 guys back as quickly as possible. I think on a short week, probably not. to tell you the truth. Like if they played Sunday, maybe that I would feel a little bit more comfortable saying he would play, but he was just activated Tuesday. That's a really short turnaround to get back into the window. So I would say no, and I think they're kind of like gaming him up with the questionable designation because he was even limited on Tuesday and Wednesday. So I really doubt that they are going to try to push him to come back from injury that quickly.
Okay, so producer Dave, Dave, I am ashamed of you for driving an F-150. I just have to say that. I've been an owner of a Chevy truck for 12 years now. How dare you? He sent me this in over message, and so PFF has a stunt success rate metric. So this was posted on October 9th, so this would have been after 5 games of the Vikings. So total dropbacks 260. They stunted about a quarter of the time, it's 66 times. 30 plays of those had pressure, so 45.5% success rate, which is 8th in the National Football League. AJ, your Rams have the highest stunt success rate through 5 weeks of the NFL season. 23 pressures on 40 stunts for a 57.5% success rate. That is fun. And we can kind of transition to the other side of the football where the Minnesota Vikings have a really good offensive line now. Everybody says it. It just kind of is, but there are still warts on it. And the biggest wart is Ed Ingram. I have fought the narrative that PFF grades say bad, and therefore he's bad. I think he's fine. I think he's around an average-ish guard. So somewhere between like 32 and like 40, like somewhere in there. He's so good as a run blocker, especially when they run duo. He just bullies guys, and he has like a Mike Tyson like punch where he can just knock you on your ass. But he has a couple disastrous plays here and there. And I thought that his game against the Lions was pretty solid, but he can be beat with stunts. And are we going to see someone like a Jared Verse looping a lot to try and get some confusion on Ed Ingram? And is that something the Rams will want to do to attack?
Yeah, they try and free up their pass rusher. Like Jared Verse is the linchpin of everything of that team. Jared, I was high on Jared Verse as a draft prospect, right? I thought Verse was an awesome player. He has completely blown my expectations out of the water. Like he's awesome. Like he totally changed every single perception I had of him this season. Or like he still has a little bit of that change of direction ability, but teams are starting to like double Verse and pay specific attention to him. And he had some awesome battles with Colton Miller last week. And so I'm expecting another great one with Darisaw this week. But the Rams kind of use him as the linchpin of their stunts. They'll like loop him in and loop another guy behind him, or they'll free up. Like this is how they typically get Byron Young free. He's taken a step forward as a pass rusher, but he's still not got a great pass rush plan. And so they will oftentimes just let him stunt free behind either Verse or Kobe Turner and come free with just using that explosive athleticism that he has. Right. And so the good thing for the Rams in this matchup is they have 2 really good interior pass rushers in Kobe Turner and Braden Fisk. I think Fisk is a go. That he's questionable to play, but they haven't really elevated him. And Neville Gallimore were both questionable, I believe. And they haven't really elevated anybody from the practice squad to try and like fill in the gaps or anything like that. So I feel like he'll be good to go. With that being in mind, like those 2 guys are really quick, really explosive athletes. They're quick off of the ball. I wouldn't be shocked if they tried to pick. I would try to pick on Ed Ingram and Garrett Bradbury, and we're really zooming in on your eyes here, Tyler.
Production issues because of producer Dave. It's this dang camera so it has the ability to autofocus. So like if you're doing something where there's a lot of movement, the camera will move with you. Every so often, it'll just zoom in randomly without warning.
We got a good pour you got going on over there. It zoomed in like right over your eyes, man.
It's funny. My wife was actually saying last night she wants me to get into skincare, And,
Yeah.
after that shot, maybe I'm going to have to get some like cucumber master or something to get rid of some of these blackheads.
Yeah.
I find it interesting that Verse has been that successful because I think I saw something where his pressure rate was like almost like 24%, which that's like
He's
Myles
got
Garrett kind of
29.
numbers.
He's got 29 on the season. He leads all rookies, and I believe he has one of the highest pass rush win rates as well. Next gen stats, if you just look at their breakdown of him, is like like you said, like this is a guy you would expect to be playing 3 years, 4 years in the league, not a rookie, right? And he's also an awesome run defender. They put out like a run defense success rate metric that I just read. He was number one with over 51% success rate. That's wild for a rookie to have that kind of success, right? It's so like Jared Verse is just it's not we're not gonna loft up a Aaron Donald comp, but he is
Mhm.
already being like I thought before the draft, like when they drafted him, he could be their best edge rusher since like prime Robert Quinn, and he might turn out to be better. That's the rate that this is trending for the Rams, and they need that. They haven't had that guy on the outside since Quinn. Like they've tried with Von Miller and it worked great, but they weren't able to bring him back for another year. So it was just really like
Mhm.
6-ish games of Von Miller that was their best edge rush play in a decade. yeah, yeah. So it's really now that Verse is coming in, like he's had that similar effect to the defense where he is providing such an impact that it affects everybody else around him positively as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that team desperately needed some kind of edge presence. And it was very interesting how they were going to approach the whole no Aaron Donald thing anymore, because you could just put in Aaron Donald and kind of piecemeal around him because he's the best defensive lineman I've ever seen, not named
Yeah,
Reggie
he
White.
was
Like,
dominant, right?
yeah, to me, Reggie White's
He
the best defensive player of all time, but Donald's like number two. Like
yeah,
that's on just a different plane of greatness.
he and JJ Watt, like prime JJ Watt, like 2013, 14, 15,
Hmm.
JJ Watt are the two best football players I've ever seen in my life. Not named Tom Brady. But even then, like it's 1, 2, and 3 in my mind. Those two are still the best defensive players. And so Donald, they're really trying to play this angle of, oh, you never know, he could come back. We might call it up, and I'm like, Donald is not. He's not coming back, right? They keep trying to play up this angle about it, but it's a similar effect. I was very worried about how the team was going to be after him because, like you said, they were able to kind of piecemeal things around him. Like they had Kobe Turner playing the one technique at 280 pounds because Aaron Donald was occupying three blockers on the other side. You're not getting away with that this season, and we're seeing that with their run defense, right? They're just getting out gapped
Hmm.
and blasted out of out of the gaps in the run game. But now it's because Verse is so successful and they're able to capitalize off of that. It's freeing up blockers in much a similar way, albeit not at the same rate because Aaron Donald was getting the tackle, the guard, and a running back, or or all three of the guard, center guard, right? It's not quite the same, but they're able to affect and free up pass rush in other ways because of Versus impact.
Yeah, the defensive line is going to be interesting. Is there a way right now that the Vikings can kind of take advantage? I know you kind of mentioned the running game. Kobe Turner had a really nice rookie year, and there was talk where he could potentially be rookie of the year defensively, but that wasn't quite able to come to fruition. What's the best way to attack them and find success running the football?
Up the middle, you attack the middle, right? Even if Fisk is healthy, and even when Kobe Turner is on, they're really susceptible up the middle of the defense. And now this week they don't have Troy Reader, so you're going to see a couple of UDFA. Well, actually, I believe all three of their running back or linebackers, excuse me, are
Hmm.
undrafted free agent. Christian Roseboom, I
Oh my
believe,
God.
is healthy, and then you've got Jacob Hummel and Omar Spates. So if there's your trivia question, right? Of who in the world are these guys that the Rams are putting out on defense? But the structure of the defense is very bad. They've been outgapped pretty frequently, and that's why they are allowing, I think, over a 50% success rate running the ball. They're one of the worst in defending the run. They just outgapped up front, and teams are able to lean on them in bully ball and run the ball successfully. Now, the Raiders weren't, because the Raiders might be the worst running team in the NFL. The Vikings are a little bit better than that. I would say they're a little bit better offensively.
They're
So
an average
it's really
running team.
like, yeah. So they're able to, if you could win up front, you're gonna create lanes on these linebackers, right? Like they're just not talented enough in the spine of the defense to really do that. Now, the Rams last week had several plays where they just didn't put a linebacker out on the field. They were like, "No, we're just going to put all defensive backs in." And I want to tell you that if you can't run the ball on that, you have a bigger problem than than I think anything. Like they just trotted out 4 or 5 the guys on the defensive line, and then put all defensive backs behind it. That's a problem. Now they've switched up the defensive back room to let Cam Curl kind of play a little bit more of the dime backer role, right? That's something that he was very good at in Washington. So they figured out 6 games into the season that he's really good running forward and not good at going the other way. And so that has kind of reinforced a little bit of their run defense. But by and large, like, they're still very susceptible up the middle. They're still not great tackling in space. And so, like, if you can kind of get the running game going and bully ball off of that, you're going to be able to pick them apart off of play action, right? That opens up the playbook tremendously. Just being able to have that, that you can win up front.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And especially with how we've seen how much great linebacker play can really make a difference in today's NFL. Not having a lot of investment in that group, they could end up hurting. But it takes time to kind of refocus and adapt to some of these changes. You can't just all of a sudden have 3 great linebackers in a room in one off season. So hopefully the Rams can get that fixed. One of the last questions I have for you is Justin Jefferson. How are the Rams going to attack Justin Jefferson? There's been teams who have tried manning up. The Jets did a really good job of this, but not everybody has Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed at their disposal. We've seen teams do the double team method with like their second corner and a safety over the top, and then put their best corner on Jordan Addison. How do you think the Rams are going to try and stop Jefferson? Because he's talked this week, only had one 100-yard game this year, about how he smells a breakout coming, and a lot of people think it could be on Thursday night.
Yeah. It really just kind of depends, because the Rams haven't played a guy, right? Hopefully they're not going to try the Michael Hoyt out in coverage game this week. Hopefully that's not the case. I would expect to see them try to do Darius Williams, or put Darius Williams on top of him, right? Like, they're going to, the whole point of them bringing back Williams was to have that guy that could travel around the formation, in essence be what Jalen Ramsey was for the team, albeit Darius Williams is not prime Jalen Ramsey, right?
Yeah,
this is the game that you have Darius Williams for, right? They've benched Tre'Davious White. He's been a healthy scratch, and they've played Kobe Durant outside, and undrafted free agent Josh Wallace has seen a lot of time in the slot. And the Vikings like to kind of move Jefferson around a little bit, get him freed up. I have a feeling that the Rams are going to want to have Darius Williams travel with him. At least that's what they should do. What I think they should do versus what they end up doing have been very different in a lot of games. But this should be a game that Darius Williams kind of shadows Justin Jefferson, and you're able to. Kobe Durant has been good this year when he's played. Josh Wallace has actually been surprisingly holding up really well in the slot. for a UDFA guy, which is nice to see because the Rams have typically been really good with finding UDFA. So I think you're kind of hoping that Darius Williams can kind of just win enough reps against Jefferson, and then you can kind of cater your coverage to that with regarding Addison and guys like that on the other side.
I think that's going to be the number one matchup going in is how can the Rams be able to stop these guys, especially because TJ Hawkinson might be coming back and then he just may eat Troy Reader live on the football field, even though Reader's not even playing.
Yeah, like it's he'll just go find him on the sideline and just dunk on him for a catch.
Former teammates, by the way.
Yeah, like it's the struggle with it, I think, is the Rams have done a lot defensively in the defensive back room. They've restructured their secondary a whole lot. They benched Cam Kinchins. He just doesn't play. They've completely phased him out. And so now it's been undrafted free agent rookie safety Jalen McCullough, who's kind of started to come in. He had 2 picks last week. They've moved Quentin Lake out of the slot to play deep to kind of help with the communication out, and I think he's been really solid back there as well. And so the Rams this is a game where if you're the Vikings, you're really going to try to pick on some of the young guys. You're going to try to pick on some of the communication errors because this is only Lake's. I believe this is Lake's second game back deep, and he helped last week tremendously. But again, they were playing Gardner Minshew and the Raiders offense, and they're playing again a little bit better of a passing game this week. A little bit, just this is a game of they're going to have opportunities, right? If Sam Darnold is not being harassed, because the Rams pass rush, like we've touched on, is awesome. I would say this is probably the Rams' best pass rush of the last several of the Sean McVay era, quite frankly, outside of that Super Bowl run. They're able to just get pressure, but they're not able to turn it into sacks. But if they can on the Vikings, right, like if they're finding success up the middle, if Jared Verse wins a rep against Darisaw, if Sam Darnold doesn't crumble, then the Vikings are going to be able to just go willy-nilly. I think they're going to be able. You're going to find your matchups on the outside. You're going to be able to pick on these linebackers over the middle of the field. But if you're the Rams, like this is a game I would expect them to get pretty aggressive up front. And like we touched on with Brian Flores, the trade-off of that is you take away things in the coverage game if you try to be too aggressive up front. Where the issue for the Rams is when you have this many moving pieces, you're starting a bunch of UDFA linebackers. If the Vikings on early downs are able to get them into base looks, like, and especially if Hawkinson is back this week, right? Like if Hawkinson plays, he might have like 100 yards on the Rams deep. Like they're just not good defending the middle of the field. And if he's matched up against, a rookie kind of a rookie UDFA safety, a rookie UDFA linebacker in the open field, and even Justin Jefferson, right? Like they're great at scheming him open looks against guys that, quite frankly, should be up against him. And this is the pitfalls of playing a really young defense for the Rams.
Theoretically, though, that playing this young of a defense is going to help you in the long run. But at the same time, when it feels like they're going all in with Stafford for one more year, well, relatively speaking, it does feel weird to have this young of a team. But AJ, I'm going to bring in producer Dave here and get this thing wrapped up. Dave, as you appear at some point in the bottom right corner, it might take him a minute. There he is. Do you have any questions for AJ before you get some predictions?
No, he's getting me excited talking about TJ Hawkinson and Justin Jefferson going against rookie and UDFA guys.
The Rams, they tried to bring in the vets, right? But Tre'Davious White, it just didn't work out. He's been, like I said, he's been a healthy scratch, and they like Quentin Lake, but in the open field, like he's not necessarily as great. He doesn't quite have that same deep range that you would hope to have as your deep safety, but he's a really effective leader for the secondary, which is what you need when you have this many rotating pieces. But yeah, like they'll be able to find matchups. It's just the Rams have got to pick them apart in the pass rush. Otherwise, like, it could be a pretty long day for that defense.
Very much so. And I like that you said that we can run power up the middle. And I like that.
Yeah. Run power often, right? That's the best kind of RPO is running power often. I again, the Rams, I believe the average weight is around like 290 of
Really?
Kobe Turner and Braden Fisk. Yeah. And Neville Gallimore, they've tried him at nose, but he's like, I think, hovering right around 300 pounds. He's more of a 3-tech. So they accidentally ended up building the whole defensive line out of 3-technique pass rushers and forgot that they needed a run defender. Bobby Brown is fine, but he's kind of started rotating out a little bit more as they've played teams that pass. And so now it's a case of, again, if you can get him into base and you're able to pick them apart, and then when the Rams start rotating into sub packages, that's when you're able to, you run away from Jared Verse, right? You don't run at Verse. Don't nothing goes Verse's direction. But everything else, like the matchups will, I think, be there.
Okay, one last question. Do you expect more purple in the stands tomorrow night than blue and yellow?
Yeah. Yes. The one thing that I know about Vikings fans is that they are very passionate. And the one thing that I know about that, the main thing that I know about Rams fans is that they don't exist in the city of Los Angeles. and so, like, it's a sad thing to say, but they just can't. Every single game feels like an away game, even when they play it in SoFi. And so, yeah, I definitely expect there to be plenty. And if you start hearing the horn going off, that might be a bad sign.
The Geller horn.
Yeah.
Listen, there we go. I'll say this: Jared versus Christian Darrisaw is going to feed families. That's going to be one hell of a match.
Yeah, that's going to be. Yeah, that's my. I'm tuning in. That as soon as that all 22 drops, I'm cutting that up. I know Brandon Thorne is probably also doing that for Trench Warfare. He's also probably excited to see that because he did that for them and Colton Miller, and that was a battle. And Christian Darrisaw is better than Miller by several lengths, but still a good tackle. Versus, like I said earlier, just awesome. Like, I think one of the most promising defenders in the NFL.
Yeah. Last thing before we go, AJ, prediction for the game. What do you think happens?
I would be surprised if it's close. that might be my prediction. I think you're going to start to see. I think you're going to see a lot of Cooper Kupp targets. I think I would expect him to have at least 10 if he's fully healthy and ready to go. I would expect to see at least 10 Cooper Kupp targets. But with the way that the Vikings offense is and the way that the Rams defense has kind of struggled, if the Vikings can start to outpace them in just scoring, I think the Rams are going to eventually just collapse and fall behind. Like they can't play from behind, is the bottom line. And so with the success that the Vikings have, I would be kind of surprised if this game was within 2 scores.
There you have it. A non-Vikings fan thinking that the Vikings are going to whip some ass. It feels good in my heart, AJ.
Yeah, I mean, you know how I am with the Rams, right? But they, like, when your offense looks that bad against the Raiders, I mean, they punted the ball multiple times. They missed a field goal. They had really 4 successful drives, and they all came on the scoring drives. All came off of turnovers. I don't think the Vikings are going to quite pumpkin the same way that the Raiders did. You're not playing Gardner Minshew this week, right? Like that's not happening. Kevin O'Connell, I think, is moving into, if not already, within the top 3 or 4 play callers in the NFL. He's going to find mismatches on this young Rams defense. And if that happens and the Rams aren't able to keep up on offense because they don't really have much of an identity, it just kind of snowballs out from there.
Yeah, it's gonna be a fun game to watch. We're gonna be glued in. AJ, I appreciate you joining me. Where can the people find you, and what kind of stuff do you have cooking up? I know that you you are happy about the Seth Luttrell firing.
Yes. You can find me on A to Z Sports. I cover Oklahoma Sooners, and I do a little bit of draft content as well as the Michigan Wolverines, and also on Twitter at AJ Schulte FB. Hopefully I'll be able to share some of my exciting projects coming up soon, but I want to kind of keep those until I'm fully ready to share with those. But we've got a lot of stuff coming. If you're a fan of Oklahoma, if you're a fan of Michigan, tune in. If you like the draft, I'm starting to ramp up content for that as well. I've been working pretty much all day doing on my top 5, top 10 positional rankings. I'm hoping those will drop probably within the next week or two. And if you're a Vikings fan, you might not be thinking about the NFL draft right now, but it never hurts to know about what's coming up.
No, we're constantly thinking for interior O-line and interior D-line.
Yeah. I mean, this is a good year to need one of those. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you, AJ, for joining. Thanks, everybody, for watching, listening. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, do all those fun things. Don't forget, we will be back tomorrow night, Thursday, at the 2-minute warning for the post-game show. I will be on at some point. Dave will be on at the 2-minute warning. I don't join until the game's over. I have work to do. But we will be there, and then we'll have
be on.
Yep. We'll have more content throughout the week, and 2 old bloggers Saturday getting to do a review show instead of a preview show. So you won't want to miss that. Until then, for AJ and Dave, I'm Tyler. SKOL Vikings.
SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notifications. It helps us grow this community that we all love, our Minnesota Vikings. And on behalf of Tyler Forness and myself, Dave Stefano, thank you so dearly for watching The Real Forno Show. SKOL, everyone!